Hello and welcome to Rogue Artisans and Crafters. We welcome you, our viewer, to our show where we feature local artists and craftspeople here in Southern Oregon. With our show, we talk to our featured artists about how they came to their art, what drives them as artists, find out stories behind their art and their art process, and how their work as artists influences their lives. Today we have the privilege of featuring local artist Ryan Moon, who does wonderfully unique pop culture, science fiction, and portrait paintings. I discovered Ryan just yesterday while visiting a new comic book store in Medford, Rogue City Comics. Ryan's work is being showcased there, and I had been looking for a second artist to feature with today's shows when a previously booked artist had to cancel due to illness. Rogue City Comics was kind enough to give Ryan's contact info to me, and he agreed to come on to the show, and I'm happy he did. So today I'm pleased to be able to now introduce Ryan Moon and his art to our audience. And Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much,
So,
Dave.
very glad that you're able to come on and kind of help me out in a pinch situation with our show production.
Yeah, I was glad it worked out too. My wife, she didn't have anything going today, which normally she does, so it worked out beautifully.
Yeah. So to begin with, how long have you been working as a professional artist?
Well, it's actually a fairly new venture for me, about 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, and got my own studio now downtown in Medford, and it's been amazing. It's really quite different from what you would expect, that whole kind of starving artist mentality.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's been wonderful.
And how did you come into doing the art that you're doing now?
Well, it goes back a little ways. So I've been teaching. I taught for about 6 years at an art academy out in Grants Pass.
Okay.
And I had actually graduated from the same school, Southern Oregon Art Academy, and it was just a wonderful school. And they asked me after I graduated to come on as an instructor. And after about 6 years, the school kind of got to the point where it was really slowing down. Our student body was starting to dwindle a little bit, and so we ended up having to close our doors. It's a real shame, but it actually kind of forced me to move out into doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, right.
So, good things come from that.
That's right.
Which is great. So, now I've always loved doing portrait work, and that's always kind of been my thing.
Right.
Really enjoyed that, and I started taking on a lot more commission work as well. And so I'll get a lot of portraits, people's kids and such, and so yeah, I think what really got me going with the portraits is the school I was going to. They were pretty academic as far as the arts go.
Right.
We got into anatomy a lot. We got into all sorts of cast and bust drawing, and so it just, I don't know, it just resonated with me.
Right. So they kind of focused on like kind of raw, fundamental, basic things that you really need to know as an artist to be the best artist you can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to painting and representational painting, if you don't know how to observe the world around you to then create that painting, then
that's right.
You're going to be a little out of luck. So.
Yeah. Now, portraiture is a primary focus in your work, but it was your work in the subjects of sci-fi, pop culture kind of subjects and that work is being exhibited right now at Rogue City Comics, downtown Medford. That's what I saw. So, of course, I'm thinking, oh, there's a really great science fiction fantasy artist here in town, because I've been a long time fan of fantasy and sci-fi artists such as Boris Vallejo and Michael Whelan and Rowena Morel and Michael and Julie Bell, and all those kinds of artists. I mean, forever I've collected their calendars and gotten prints and and if there was a sci-fi book I bought, it was typically because of the art that was on the cover.
Oh, yeah.
Right, by one of those artists.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's always been a big interest of mine. So the fact that you're here locally and you're producing some of this really great, unique stuff in that arena. I found really exciting. So, I mean, I'm grateful that we're able to connect.
Yeah, yeah, me as well.
Yeah. Um, so, but you got like you brought some examples of your work. So you go beyond the portraits and doing the sci-fi stuff. I mean, you've got an example of your sci-fi with the Star Wars image here, and then if that could be brought up, that would be great. Yeah. So. That represents kind of an example of your science fiction themed kind of work. But then you also have got an example of your portrait work here as well. If we could bring that up. Yeah, there we go. And then you've got like a Western scene that you've done that's behind you. You got the Triumph motorcycle. I mean, you cover more than just portraiture.
Yeah.
And now, in your media, what media are you using for the art that you're producing?
As far as well, photographs.
Yeah. Are you using acrylics? Are you using
Oh,
oils?
medium. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, oils. I'm
Yeah.
mostly using. Actually, only use oil paint.
Okay.
Yeah, I experimented a little bit in digital art, but there's something that's so much more visceral when it comes to
Yeah.
oil painting, and it was just it's one of those things that I really, really fell in love with oils the first time I used them.
Yeah.
And it just the way the effects that you can get from it, the luster that it has, the way you can thicken, and thin it, and so yeah, there's this so much to it that
I mean, I've done oil painting and acrylics and watercolor in the past in my life, and I found that oils were the most pleasurable media for me to get into, just because of that variety of effects and the feel of the process, right? And I've done lots of like digital graphic design work in my own work in the past, but have never felt any satisfaction out of the digital creation process compared to the physical creation process of dealing with whether it's dealing with in oils or doing pencil drawing or whatever. There seems to be I found for myself that there's something lost in the visceral feel of art creation when you're doing everything digitally in the computer.
Yep, absolutely. And the other thing too that I find is, when you see you're going through even a book and you see someone's artwork, it's impressive, it looks great, but then when you see it in person and you see the texture of it and you see the transparencies and all of the things that make it, that medium.
Yeah.
It's so far removed from a computer screen, and so
that's right.
When somebody does an art piece, and I'm not downplaying it at all, but I think digital media is amazing, but that when you see it, that's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
It's you can't go to a museum and see a Rembrandt. If it was just a digital painting, you see it on the screen, and depending on how good that screen is, that's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
So, I love the fact that when you're creating something physical, that it kind of takes different forms, but you can, when you stand in front of that painting, there's not much like it. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that strikes me in your art is the textural feel that comes across in your various pieces, and I find that really appealing to me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I tend to work with different textures as much as I I don't really paint very thick. My brush strokes and stuff, they all tend to be fairly thin, and I use a lot of glaze layers and such. But I try to use texture as much as I can, or just the illusion of texture. And I have a process that's rather unique comparatively to most, in that I will paint out a photograph from a photograph, and then it looks pretty well finished. Most people would look at it and say that it's done, and then I take several colors that I've used throughout that portrait, and I'll use a medium and thin them out, and then I splatter that canvas, and I create an abstraction over the whole thing.
Yes, because that's something that strikes me in your work, is there's that feel of a splatter technique around on the edges and kind of around the key subject, but it just makes for such a unique, cool appearance and presentation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was funny the way that I got even started in it, doing that. I was doing a portrait of a friend of mine, and I was so frustrated with it. And I was painting really late one night, and I just couldn't get this one part, and it wasn't coming together. And so I was like, I'm done with this thing. And so I just mixed up some paint, just like threw it at the board, and just kind of messed it up. And I went to bed, and just remember thinking how frustrated I was. I got up the next morning, and I come back to the panel, this panel that I'm working on, and I'm looking at it, and there's just little bits of this face that's kind of coming through at me. So I picked up my brush, and I start kind of mixing up some of these flesh tones and start working them in, and it was almost as if I was carving or something, like it just like I was sculpting it, and I was just putting these little bits of paint here and there that needed just a hair, just a little bit, and it brought that face out all of a sudden. And so I just touched a little bit more, and all before I knew it, I had this portrait that I was looking for. It was what I was looking for in my mind, that I just couldn't quite get. And so I took it into my instructor, and he looked at it and he said, "Wow, Ryan, I'm really impressed," and he never said that. He never say that to me.
Right, yeah.
And so immediately he says, "You need to go home and do this again."
Yeah.
And so I started my next one, and then I did another one, and it started to become a little bit more relevant, as far as an actual technique, and it wasn't just like a one-time thing. So I kept doing it, and it just, there was something about the abstract element of it that it didn't matter how much control I felt like I had with the painting or portrait. I could never get what that abstract motion and movement and color was doing that I didn't have control over. It was this like almost chaos that I could create and then bring some order to it in order to create that visual order that I needed. And so it really, that part of it really resonated with me.
Well, the term you referred to sculptural, and that's a good way to kind of that resonates with me, because when I look at your pieces, there is a bit of a sculptural feel to the whole overall piece.
Well, thank you.
And I just find it cool. I mean, it's so
nice. Well, good. Yeah, one of my main objectives when I paint, when I stepped up to the canvas, is I want to try to create a three-dimensional illusion on a two-dimensional surface. And so trying to create that sculptural type of a feel is very high on my priority list. So thank you. I take that as a very high compliment.
Well, we have some additional images to bring up showcasing your work. So if the control room could bring up those images, and we'll just begin to kind of talk about some of these. So let's see. So there we go. We got These are like one of your pop culture kinds of subjects
Yeah.
that you've done.
So this particular piece, I have several, including the Star Wars painting, they're commission pieces.
Okay.
And I have a really good friend who is building a new home, and so he needed some new artwork.
Yeah.
And he said, I have this movie room that I'm putting in, and it would be awesome if you could do some, of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And so he just gave me several titles, and he said, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Put them together how you want. And Back to the Future is definitely one of my favorites.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't want to do the traditional stuff with the the Drew Strauss, where he's looking at the watch
Yeah.
and all that. I wanted to kind of relay that, like, just so cool. I mean, he's such an amazing icon as far as Marty McFly, and then obviously the DeLorean with the flux capacitor. So that's how it kind of came about, and I tried to use some colors that were real prevalent in the 80s.
Right. Yeah.
That bright hot pink and some of the blues, and so.
Yeah, well, that definitely captures a sense of the 80s. I can definitely see that in the coloration, yeah. Yeah, so let's go on to the next. Iron Man, yeah.
So this was another commission piece, and it was kind of random. I got a call from a friend of mine, and he said, he's also an artist, and one of his co-workers had asked him to do a painting for him, and he said, well, I just really don't do that type of painting. And so he handed it off to me, and I talked to her, and she said, yeah, my husband loves Iron Man, so can you paint this Iron Man? And it was a challenge, at first it's like, okay, how do I get that gold to make, to look gold? And I don't paint metallic things very often, so but yeah, that's how it turned out. And
yeah, it looks great.
Thanks.
So let's go on to the next. Looks like Game of Thrones to me.
It is another one of those commission pieces. His wife is a huge fan, and so she got to pick that one. And she said, I can do a Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And
yeah, well, you can't go wrong with Mother of Dragons. So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go on to the next.
So this is a Ghost in the Shell piece. It was kind of early on when I had first got my studio, and I was experimenting with different things, and I had just gotten some of these commission pieces, and I was realizing how big fan art is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
amazing,
huge. Amazing. And well, the movie hadn't come out yet. I was watching the preview for it, and I was like, oh man, this looks cool. I love those good sci-fi movies. So I picked a still from it and started working on that. And I actually had just sold this piece to a gentleman in Paris, actually.
Oh, wow.
Who's a big fan.
Yeah.
So shipping that one off pretty soon.
Great. All right, let's go on to the next. Maryland. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one was done probably 5 or 6 years ago. One of my students, actually, huge Maryland fan, and she was doing some Gil Elvgren copies.
Oh yeah, right.
And they were just turning out amazing. And I said, hey, you want to do a trade?
Yeah.
And and she was really excited about that. So I did a Maryland for her, and she did me a Gil Elvgren, and so still have that one hanging up. So she has the original of this one, and just sell some prints of this.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's a great piece. It definitely does a great honor to Maryland. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So let's go on to the next.
This is another commission piece. An acquaintance, actually, she follows me on my Instagram account and has been following me for quite a while. She said that she's just been really, really wanting to commission me to do something. She just didn't know what. And so she said, well, my husband's father passed away, and he was a conductor, and I have this great picture. Would you mind doing this painting for me? And I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And it was a black and white, and so I wasn't quite sure. I don't really work in black and white all that often, and if I do, it's mostly in like charcoal.
Right.
So I put that together, and I was actually pretty happy with the way it turned out. It did a raw umber underpainting, and then just worked in my gray values over the top, and they really enjoyed it. So they love
Yeah,
it.
well, it's a wonderful looking piece. So let's go on to the next.
Yes, this was one of my first in the venture of moving into that abstract work. This is actually a painting of my wife,
Okay.
and I took this photograph of her quite a while ago. It's always been really dear to me, and funny story though, because I told her I was going to do a painting of her, and
Yeah.
it's a little nerve wracking, not just for me, but also for them, because
Yeah.
they're like, okay,
Yeah,
hopefully
right.
this one turns out,
Yeah.
eye over here or
Yeah,
something.
right.
So as I started working through it, most paintings, they all go through that ugly phase, where it's like, oh, it just looks so bad at first. It doesn't have all the pop and the values and everything, and so I did that thing that I do. I splattered it and all this stuff and started pulling it out, and it's one of her absolute favorite paintings now.
Yeah.
And not just because it's her. It's,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it looks great. So let's go on to the next.
This is one of my students.
Okay.
He's just such an amazing person. He's come from a really hard life. Got into gangs and drugs and guns and stuff at a really early age, and decided that he needed to pull himself out.
Yeah.
And so he moved in. He lived down in LA, moved up to Grants Pass.
Okay.
Heard about the school, decided to go there, and just completely turned his life around. And so I thought, man, I want to do a portrait of you.
Yeah.
And so I painted this portrait of him, and
Yeah.
have this one hanging in my studio. Actually, it's part of my own collection.
Oh,
So.
wow. Well, it's definitely a nice portrait. I really like that. So let's go on to the next.
This is another fan art piece. I don't know if you've heard of the Mr. Robot. It's an Amazon show.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I've not seen any of the episodes.
Really interesting show. Anyway, so yeah, I just finished that one up a couple months ago. But
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next.
another commission piece. Out of most of my commission pieces, especially with kids, I really enjoyed the way this one turned out. The colors worked well. The composition was nice. I think the abstract aspect of it came through pretty well. So I think it was a 30 by 40 piece that I had done. So.
Okay. And I think there's maybe one more that we'll take a look at. And
this one is on glass. I was experimenting with using transparencies, and like I say, I work with a lot of glazes and such. And so, it's really difficult.
Okay.
Really difficult to, relay that without actually showing you in person.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a fun piece. I don't really work on glass all that much anymore, just because it's very difficult to ship it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and we got this one. I forgot about this. So this is another fan art piece. Stranger Things.
Oh, okay.
Huge one from Netflix right now.
Yeah.
And man, as soon as I posted that one, it sold.
Oh, wow. Well,
like,
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You always want to see that happen.
Yeah.
As an
absolutely.
artist. Yeah. So I think that's the end for those for the images that we've seen. And then now, in terms of being able for people to get a hold of you and be able to do commissions, and how do they get a hold of you?
Well, easiest way is probably through my website. There's an inquire page on there, and they can just fill in the information and ask the question, whatever it is that they would like to do, and it goes straight to my email.
Right.
And so I'll get that. They could always, if you're on social media, Instagram is probably the best way to get a hold of me, or Facebook as well. And it's my Instagram is Ryan_moon_art.
Okay.
And that will come up, and it's got a larger portfolio of my stuff on there. So.
Right. And then your website is ryan-moon.com.
Ryan-moon.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the typical price range for commissions and for your art in general?
That's a good question. So 18 by 24s, depending on complexity, generally go from 800 to 1200.
Okay.
And then I price them based on size after that. So.
Okay. Well, Ryan, I appreciate you coming on to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dave.
Yeah, it's really, you're an incredible artist. I love the style of what you're producing, and it's really exciting to see.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All right. So we've reached the end of our show, Rogue Artisans and Crafters, and we thank you at home for joining us and learning about our featured artist, Ryan Moon. We thank Ryan for being our featured artist and appearing on our show to discuss his life and work. We also want to thank our crew who have made it possible to put this program together, and to thank RVTV for their wonderful studio facility, which allows us to produce shows such as this one. If you'd like to become a studio producer and create your own public access show, you can contact RVTV to learn how. You can watch this show on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. and Thursday evenings at 11:30 p.m. on Channel 15 of the Ashland Home Network, and in the rest of Southern Oregon via Charter Cable on Channel 182. You can also find all episodes of Rogue Artisans and Crafters at archive.org. You can also visit RVTV online at rvtv.sou.edu to find live streaming of all RVTV shows. You can follow our show on Facebook by visiting and liking our official show page. Just search for Rogue Artisans and Crafters. You can learn more about Ryan Moon and his art by visiting ryan-moon.com. You can also follow Ryan and his art through his social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and Tumblr. I'm your host, David Glamour Dave Nienow, and we will see you next time.